Hi, my name is Rohainee Cundangan, and I'm gonna discuss about the behavioral views of learning. It is the first day of classes, and Brian is standing at the door of his classroom, waiting for his new teacher and peers. As he looks inside, he marvels at the colorful posters illustrating dinosaurs and the artwork decorating the classroom walls. All of a sudden, he is startled by a screaming voice that shouts, "Quiet!" Brian takes a step back, and is almost about to cry when his new teacher shows up at the door to greet him. Unfortunately, the teacher's screaming continues as school days go by, and now Brian feels scared about his teacher even when she speaks softly to him. So, what are Brian's actions revealing? How would you explain Brian's feelings towards his teacher? And what could you do to revert Brian's negative? So think about how you respond to these questions as we go along the chapter. So what is the behavioral view of how we learn? So learning, according to behaviorism, is any relatively permanent change in our thoughts, feelings, or behavior that results from our experiences. So learning should be distinguished from maturation, which is the result of our genetic programming, and from the short-term changes that result from our experiences. So learning can be conscious and unconscious. And although as teachers, we are mostly concerned with students' deliberate and goal-oriented learning in the classroom. So there are several prominent views about how we learn. There is this behavioral, cognitive, socio-cognitive, and constructivist views of learning. So in this video, I will introduce to you to the first view of learning, which is behaviorism. Behaviorism originated with the work of the American psychologist named John B. Watson. In 1913, he published an article which is called the Behaviorist Manifesto, in which he argued that psychology should be more concerned with the study of human behavior rather than with the study of the human mind. Therefore, the name behaviorism. So, according to behaviorism, learning is a relatively enduring stage in observable behavior that results from our experiences. So have you noticed the difference between this definition and the one offered at the beginning of this section? So because changes in people's mental states cannot be observed objectively, behaviorists claim that the only scientific evidence for learning was the observable changes in behavior. Consequently, they did not consider changes in people's thoughts or beliefs in the definition of learning. So now, let's examine the first theory of behaviorism, which is the classical conditioning. So this theory looks at the automatic responses we have. For example, if someone pinches you, you would probably pull your arm away, right? So how does this type of conditioning apply to the classroom? Now, let us more define what is classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is a contiguity theory of learning. At the core of the behaviorist perspective is the concept of learning through association. Classical conditioning explains learning as the pairing of automatic responses to a new stimuli. So in classical conditioning terms, the stimuli is called unconditioned stimulus and the automatic response is called the unconditioned response. These are called unconditioned because our organisms are programmed to react in that way automatically under any condition. So at this point, there is no learning yet. It was the Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov who discovered how automatic reactions may become associated with non-automatic responses, leading to the phenomenon of classical conditioning. So now, let's explore Pavlov's classical conditioning paradigm. So here we have a dog. The dog is presented with food. So of course, if the dog is presented with food, the dog will salivate. So the salivation here, the dog salivation, is what we call the unconditioned response. It is called unconditioned because it is the automatic reaction of the dog when he sees the food, which is the food is our unconditioned stimulus. So what Pavlov did is that he paired the food with the bell. Our dog here is our subject and now presented the food and then with the ringing, the food with the ringing of the bell, which results in the salivation of the dog. So after several attempts of pairing with the food and the bell, which results to dog salivation, the dog associates the ringing of the bell with the food. So now, when the dog hears the bell, he thinks of food. So dog plus bell results to the dog salivation. Now the salivation of the dog is now our conditioned response, and the bell here is our conditioned stimulus. So now, this is the process of Pavlov's classical conditioning. So now we take classical conditioning to the classroom. Let's go back to the scenario on the first part of the video. So Brian's reactions are revealing a case of classical conditioning. In this scenario, Brian displayed an automatic, natural reaction to a human scream. Therefore, the teacher's scream acts as an unconditioned stimulus, and Brian's withdrawal and fear are the unconditioned responses. Brian's response would have probably been the same regardless who had screamed at, of who had screamed. In fact, he did not even know who his teacher was at that point. He had seen his teacher for the first time. Under different circumstances, he would have probably reacted very differently. Therefore, his teacher was originally a neutral stimulus. So, as the school days go by, Brian witnesses many other occasions where his teacher screams unexpectedly, which makes him feel very insecure and fearful. Eventually, Brian becomes classically conditioned, and the mere presence of the teacher, even when she is not screaming, produces the same emotional effects. So at this point, the teacher is the conditioned stimulus, and Brian's emotional reactions toward her are the conditioned response. So Brian's experience illustrates why people sometimes have a strong emotional reactions to what might have seemed to be fairly a neutral stimuli. It is not uncommon to find children who have developed anxiety to test taking after having been criticized strongly about past failures. So originally, the criticism is the unconditioned stimulus that elicits anxiety, the unconditioned response. With time, even when the students know that they are very well prepared, the mere presence of the test, which is the conditioned stimulus, may elicit anxiety. So now, that is what classical conditioning is, based on Pavlov's paradigm, and when the classical conditioning is taken into the classroom. So that ends my video, and I hope you learned something.